Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And today I'd like to sort of begin with a quote, and it's from one of my favorite films, Citizen Kane. I love all of Orson Welles' films, and the quote is, "Old age is the only disease that you don't look forward to being cured of." So sit back, relax, because we're going to talk about youth and age as opposed to youth and Asia, but not necessarily unrelated to youth becoming aged in Asia, especially in Japan, where they love music of all sorts. But enough with the corny intros. The basic premise of what I was thinking about is, why do people say that someone's tastes in music change as they grow older? Is there a musical reason for this? Is there a metabolical or anatomical reason for it? Is there a purely sociological explanation for it? And so I thought, how does it relate to other things that are external to us but that relate to our senses? And I thought, think of food and drink. Why is it that certain foods they claim kids like more than adults? And I've heard some people say that the nature of taste buds change as we grow older, and I'm sure they do. But I think a lot of it is just marketing. In certain countries like the US, Canada, Northern Europe, they market trashier foods to kids than to adults, where in countries like in Southern Europe, Greece, Italy, Spain, etc., generally the kids and the adults eat the same thing. The kids might eat less, but it's more or less the same thing. If the parents are eating an octopus, then the kids are eating an octopus. They're not sort of eating their, Mick processed whatever. So I think that a lot of the idea about, oh, we eat different foods when we're older, I think a lot of it is sociological conditioning based on Madison Avenue more than it's based on anything necessarily metabolical. Of course, when you're very young and you don't have teeth, you have to eat certain kinds of foods, and when you're very old and don't have teeth, you have to eat certain kinds of foods. But there's a large lifetime in between to eat all sorts of things. So, how does that relate to music? Well, I suppose when you're very young, your mind isn't developed enough to sort of retain enough musical memory to make it impactful. And when you're old, you might not have that same retention. But again, let's look at the periods in between. Well, a lot of it is also about marketing. They have certain music that they sort of market to, young kids, the Wheels on the Bus and, Sesame Street stuff. And then when you're sort of in the preteens, it's stuff about, dancing in schools. And then by the time you're in your teens and 20s, the record industry is ready to sex you up with very explicit love songs. And I suppose when you're a bit older, you've got like the Quiet Storm. And I'm being very facetious here, but it is making a serious point that different music is aimed at different demographics. But what about people who don't follow trends? What about people who really, really like music? And I have to say that in my case, and I might be a bad example because I'm a music weirdo, but I like more or less everything that I used to like. I'm struggling to think of any exceptions. And the only thing that changes is with every day and every year, I discover more music that I like, but it doesn't replace the music that I already like. And that's why I think, again, a lot of it is sociological because someone said, oh, yeah, I used to go to rock concerts when I was in my 20s. Okay, and I get maybe you don't want to go to the concerts, but do you still listen to the same bands on Spotify? No, I did that when I was a kid. Okay, is that because you have a different perspective of the music? Do the chords, do the harmonies, do the rhythmic patterns, do the melody, do the lyrics resonate differently with you? Or is it a sociologically negative association that, oh, listening to, I don't know, Foreigner reminds me of when I was 18 and I better not do that anymore? I really don't know. And again, I think a lot of this is something that we can blame on the boomers, maybe, because look at the generation before. Look at the greatest generation. Well, when they were kids, depending on where they fell in that greatest generation, they were listening to Bing Crosby when he was the latest thing, and Frank Sinatra, and then Perry Como and Tony Bennett, and a bit later on, Vic Damone and Andy Williams. And when these people were middle-aged, they were listening to the same things, and when they were older and they were listening to the same things. And when they were older yet, they were complaining to their grandkids who are watching the MTV, why can't they play anything nice and proper like Frank Sinatra? And so maybe again, because the boomers were the first generation to really be submitted to 24/7 Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue is very much a thing, pardon me, in the greatest generation, but their tactics became so much more refined and they became that much more intertwined with the government and the CIA. Please don't kill me, than they were in previous generations. So maybe it's that, but let's look at other generations and see what we could anticipate. Gen Xers, I think, tend to be more like the greatest generation in the sense of what did they grow up on? Well, let's say 80s and 90s music, the later end of the 80s. The boomers were still sort of in the early 80s. And so when you talk to these people, golly, it's this horrible humidity. Um, if they were listening to things like NWA and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg when they were fresh in the early 90s, they still probably like those artists. If they were more the middle of the road type and they were listening to Hootie and the Blowfish and Pearl Jam, they still probably, because Gen X is still relatively young, and if they're well off enough, given the price of concert tickets, if Pearl Jam are having a concert in their town, they'll still probably go. So where does that leave sort of the current generation? Are they going to when Taylor Swift is Cher's age and her fans are I don't know Mitch McConnell's age? No, he's older than Cher, but she's a lot better looking. Are they still going to be going to Taylor Swift? It will be interesting to see. So when you really think about it, I would say that musical tastes don't really change any more than food has to, except for, the very early days and the very final days or years. But I think the idea that, oh, this music is for kids, unless it's explicitly children's music, like Grover and Snuffleupagus sing the alphabet, anything beyond that, I think that if it's good, there's no reason, musically speaking, for you to abandon it other than what we learn from marketing from Madison Avenue. So that's just a theory. I'm sure that you'll have others. So let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.